Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Choppy trade continues on Dalal Street. The Sensex and the Nifty end with moderate losses as early gains from inline US inflation data are raised by caution ahead of domestic economic data due later today. The rupee weakens to another record low, but the fall is limited by likely RBI intervention. Chief Economic Advisor Anantha Nageshwaran remains upbeat about the 6.5 to 7% GDP growth this fiscal, reiterates that the 7-quarter low numbers for the second quarter are not a cause for alarm, adds he expects the numbers to be revised upwards, adding that enduring global uncertainties will shape growth trends in the years ahead. The Cabinet clears a bill which will pave the way for simultaneous elections across the country. The government is likely to introduce the bill in the ongoing winter session. Sources say it's likely to be presented before the Joint Parliamentary Committee for wider consultation. Russia's Rosneft agrees to supply nearly 5 lakh barrels of crude oil per day to Reliance Industries, says Reuters, citing sources. The deal is pegged at around $13 billion a year and would be the biggest energy deal signed between the two countries to date. Top consumer companies look forward to a better FY26 even as they battle a demand crunch in India. Britannia says it will take a few more quarters for demand to bounce back. Godrej Consumer flags a slowdown in the soaps and home insecticide segments. The competition watchdog asks that all cases against Amazon and Flipkart be transferred to the Supreme Court, claims multiple proceedings on the same issue will cause delays, strain resources and could lead to conflicting rulings. The Apex Court agrees to hear the matter next week. Syria's transitional prime minister urges displaced Syrians to return home, promises to ensure civil and religious rights of all groups will be respected. But the exodus of Syrians into neighbors like Lebanon continues. Israeli forces move deeper into Syria. The US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken heads to Jordan and Turkey to rally regional support for a Gaza ceasefire deal and a smooth transition in Syria. South Korean opposition parties submit a new motion to impeach President Yoon less than a week after a failed bid. Ruling party leader says they are ready to back the fresh motion even as Yoon vows to fight to the end, defends his short-lived declaration of martial law. Elon Musk creates history by becoming the first person with a net worth in excess of $400 billion. Bloomberg attributes the surge to a spike in the stock prices of a listed company, Tesla, and in privately owned SpaceX. And speaking of stock market-related wealth, Indian investors have seen quite a bit of fluctuation in their wealth today as choppiness continued to plague the trading session. Early gains that came on the back of US inflation data that came in along expected lines short-lived. In fact, traders turned cautious ahead of domestic inflation and macro data due after the close of trade. The Sensex and the Nifty ending the session with moderate losses, with the action remaining largely stock-specific. In the currency market, meanwhile, we've also seen choppy trade. The domestic currency weakened to yet another record low. However, the new closing price could have been lower if it had not been for dollar selling by banks, presumably on behalf of the RBI. Well, staying with macros, Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran maintains that the Indian economy will grow in the range of 6.5 to 7% this fiscal, and this is despite growth in Q2 slowing to a 7-quarter low of 5.4%. Speaking at a CII event, Nageshwaran said he expects the second quarter GDP to be revised upwards. He also highlighted capital deployment in the private sector, and he believes that's picking up. However, he didn't rule out the impact of global challenges on India's growth prospects going ahead. Take a look.
It is not that we think that the second quarter slowdown is purely a data artifact, and as more data come in, it would automatically be upgraded. Numbers would be revised higher. Or for that matter, it could be a simple seasonal factor because of rains, because of some religious observance in September, etc. But nonetheless, I think the fact remains that we will be on track to achieve the kind of growth numbers that we had penciled in the economic survey in July, somewhere between 6.5 and 7 for the whole financial year.
Well, that is the Chief Economic Advisor, and the data that we've been waiting for. Retail inflation for the month of November has come in within the RBI's tolerance band. CPI coming in at 5.48%. October industrial output is out as well. Lata is here now with the fine print. Lata, long expected lines this time around, no surprises.
Yes, very big relief. The October inflation had come in at 6.21 against expectations of 5.9. Now it's come absolutely in line. The same City 18 poll was 5.5, and the number we have got is 5.48%. So far, so good. But perhaps what will rankle with everyone, including the Reserve Bank, will be the food inflation. That's come in at over 9%, 9.04 to be precise, versus 8.7 last month, that is October, and an expectation that it will be at least, say, 8.5. That was what our poll threw up for the month of November. But, that's not to be. It is come in higher at 9.04%. The culprit clearly is edible oils. I mean, everyone knows that vegetable prices have been rather high. And that one continues at a fairly high level of 29%. We know that tomatoes, potatoes and onions are still ruling at 50, 60 rupees in most markets. So that 29% inflation was expected year on year. Month on month, it's come down a bit. But what has definitely taken the food index higher is edible oils and fats at 13.3%. Remember, this is entirely policy driven. The government raised the import tariffs on edible oils so that farmers have a better deal. It was expected that it will play for 1 month, which it did in the month of October, which is why we had that huge 6.2% inflation. The expectation was there'll be a small play in the current month also, but that there would be a 13.3% higher edible oil prices was perhaps not on the cards, or not at least distilled. That is going to be a bit of a shock. But overall inflation at 5.5%, 5.48 to be precise, is something which the street expected. The Reserve Bank's average for the 3 months, October, November, December, is 5.7. We already have a 6.2, and now we have a 5.5. We need at least a 5.3 or thereabouts for the average to come at 5.7. We may not get it. So there is still a lot of jitters about inflation. I don't know if this will change the mind of the governor when he goes to present, when the new governor goes to present his policy in February, because he will have one more number. He will have the December number. December number is lower at 5.3. I think he can still go ahead and announce a rate cut. Otherwise, he will be on sticky terrain. But we will have to wait and see. At the moment, no shocks. IIP is in line. I mean, it's a lag number. It's October. October, everyone knows everything about October. At 3.5%, it's entirely in line with expectations.
All right, Lata, many thanks for joining us. That's inflation and IIP for you. No surprises as far as the inflation print is concerned at this point in time. Of course, will this prompt the Reserve Bank to cut or not in February is the big question. Now, staffing firm TeamLease has said it is consistently seeing an average salary inflation of 6 to 8% on an annualized basis across private companies. Now, it works with salary inflation is the increase in the amount people earn over time. This comes a week after the Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran said that corporate wage growth has not kept pace with inflation in India. In fact, a recent FICCI Quest Corp report has highlighted that compounded annual wage growth across 6 sectors between 2019 and 2023 ranged between 0.8% and 5.4%. Speaking to CNBC TV18, TeamLease's CFO said that the salary inflation has only slowed down in the IT sector as per the data that they've surveyed.
For us, the salary inflation for the 3 lakh employees that we have on our rolls has been consistently between 6 to 8% year on year. Only for IT over the last 1.5 years, it has been slowed down. It's like 2 to 3%. And that's more like a correction which has happened, like the hikes that were given during the 2 years of COVID time. It's more like last 2 years is a correction on that number. Otherwise, we are not seeing any kind of major drop or inconsistency in the salary inflation levels year on year.
Well, that is the latest there as far as wage inflation is concerned. The big news coming in from the cabinet. As per sources, it's clear a bill that once passed by Parliament will pave the way for simultaneous elections across India. The government is likely to introduce the bill known as the One Nation, One Election Bill in the ongoing winter session of Parliament. Remember, a high-level government-appointed panel headed by the former President Ramnath Kovind had submitted its report recommending simultaneous polls to President Murmu in March this year. Ashmit joins us now with more. Ashmit, take us through what the panel had recommended, and of course this could possibly be headed to the JPC as well.
Well, that could potentially be a demand that the opposition raises should the parliament continue to function. But that, of course, is for a later date. For now, we find that the cabinet has granted its nod. This issue will now travel to the assembly, to the Lok Sabha, I understand. With respect to the recommendations that fell from the Kovind panel, a few important aspects to remember. Number one, the panel had asked for a legal framework, so that legal framework is sought to be put in place by way of this legislation. Subsequently, the formula that had been recommended by the panel is that that first there should be synchronized elections between the parliamentary elections as well as the assembly elections. And as a step 2 of that, there should be further synchronization between not just the parliamentary and the assembly elections, but also the municipal and panchayat elections. The formula, the way to go about it, the way that had been proposed is that after a general election, the president will will in fact notify an appointed date since when the Lok Sabha will take charge and will take over. The Lok Sabha will be constituted. After the appointment date, any assembly that is constituted at the state level, the term of that assembly will be limited to the term of the original Lok Sabha since the appointed date. This will only be a transitory measure, and then subsequently there will be synchronized elections between the parliament as well as the assembly. Also, what happens in case an assembly or a Lok Sabha is dissolved on account of, let's say, a no confidence motion? So the example that the COVID panel gives and for the way forward is that, let's suppose the Lok Sabha, which has a term of 5 years, we have a situation where the Lok Sabha is dissolved within a period of 3 years. Then the formula that has been proposed is that there will be a fresh election held, a fresh Lok Sabha will be constituted, but the term of this fresh Lok Sabha will only be for the pending term of the preceding Lok Sabha, which 5 minus 3 leaves us with 2 years. That's the formula that has been proposed. And then subsequently, the cycle continues of a 5-year term, synchronized elections between panchayat and assembly elections. This will not be complete, the Kovind panel said, without a single common electoral roll, single common electoral card for all the voters. That's the epic card that has been proposed by the Kovind panel. And as far as the logistical constraints are concerned, that the Kovind panel says is something that the EC will have to take over, the Election Commission, in terms of provisioning for EVMs as well as for VVPAT machines.
All right, Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. That's the big story there coming in from the Cabinet. The government has sought Parliament's approval for an additional cash expenditure of around 44,000 crores. The funds will be directed towards expanding key welfare schemes, including the PM Kisan scheme, as well as the fertilizer subsidy. Sapna standing by with more on the supplementary demand for grants. Sapna.
Well, as the numbers are visible, an additional gross expenditure of 87,000 crores is what the government has budgeted, estimated as of now. But the cash outgo is less than half of that, around 44,000 crores. Generally, the first supplementaries of the government, they have been on the lower side because of better cash management and other reasons which are very well known. Having said that, 2 to 3 major components is what we can look at. Additional spend for agriculture, around 75-odd crores, out of which 35-odd crores is for PM Kisan. Now, after a long time, some additional amount is being asked for PM Kisan. Basically, maybe the number of beneficiaries under PM Kisan are going up. That could be one of the reasons. This will also push up the PM Kisan budget for this year from 60,000 crores to 63,500-odd crores. Second, also in terms of the fertilizer subsidy, an additionality of 6,500 crores required for PNK fertilizer subsidy. So that also needs to be kept in mind. Last but not the least, additional revenue expenditure for the defense services. It's not for capital formation, but as revenue expenditure. So net around 24,000 crores is what the government is talking about. But importantly enough, government is also indicating that despite this, they are going to be very much within the FY25 budget aim as far as the expenditure target is concerned and as far as the fiscal deficit number is concerned.
Sapna, many thanks. And shares of Reliance Industries in the spotlight on the back of a Reuters report that said that it signed a big deal with Russian state-owned oil giant Rosneft. Reuters quoting sources said Rosneft has agreed to supply nearly 5 lakh barrels of crude oil per day to Reliance. That's almost 0.5% of global supply. The 10-year deal is pegged at around $13 billion a year, making it one of the biggest energy deals between the two countries. The agreement comes even as Western sanctions continue to be imposed on Russian crude oil following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Standard disclaimer on your screens. Network 18 and TV 18, the companies that operate CNBC TV 18, are controlled by the Independent Media Trust, of which Reliance Industries is the sole beneficiary. Consumer-facing companies have highlighted a slowdown in demand, especially in urban India. While volumes have been under stress, industry heads tell CNBC TV 18 the sector could see a pickup in demand over the next few quarters. Take a look.
The entire FMCG sector, one good thing that's positive is that the rural demand has picked up, and that's been seen across all companies, while the volumes have been under stress overall we're seeing urban a little slowing down, and also there has been a channel shift that's happening in the urban side as well. I think the trend will continue for a quarter or two more in terms of that, and after that I think FY26 would be quite a strong year for the entire FMCG sector to bounce back. As organization, inflation is much higher than that. As an organization, we are taking all steps to ensure cost efficiency first and foremost, and therefore a lot of work is happening on that area so that we don't have to pass on the entire cost to the consumers.
Bulk of the issue has to do with the increase in oil prices, which a lot of industries are facing. Palm oil prices are up 50% in the last 6 months, and soaps uses a lot of palm oil. So margins get affected when palm oil prices go up. When you take up consumer prices, volumes fall. But these are things we've seen before. I mean, we've seen different palm cycles before. We're in the middle of a highly inflationary palm cycle. And since our diagnosis is the issue is transitory, we should go back to our growth trajectory. There might be a little bit of issue in the soaps for a few more months, but broadly speaking, we expect things to improve.
Our objective would definitely be double-digit underlying volume growth for the whole year, and therefore also for the second half. That is our underlying objective. That's what we would always aim for.
You would aim for that, but I just wanted to understand how close are you to that?
That you will know in January.
Well, that's the FMCG CEO Centimeter. In the IPO corner, the Jhunjhunwala-backed ventures in Venture Knowledge Solutions public issue opened for subscription today. The 2,500 crore rupee IPO was oversubscribed on the first day of bidding, and this was led by qualified institutional buyers, followed by retail investors. The public issue is entirely an offer for sale, with the issue price between 1,265 to 1,329 rupees per share. Well, the 8,000 crore rupee IPO of Vishal Mega Mart has been fully subscribed on day 2 of bidding. This was largely led by non-institutional investors, whose portion was booked by more than 260%, followed by retail investors. The IPO is entirely an offer for sale and no fresh issuance of equity. On to action from the courts. India's competition watchdog has filed a plea in the Supreme Court seeking the transfer of all pending competition cases against Amazon and Flipkart across various high courts. The move comes in response to multiple hearings scheduled across different states, creating the risk of conflicting rulings and straining its resources. The Apex Court has agreed to hear the CCI's plea before the 17th of December. We will head into a break, but up next, the standoff between the government and opposition continues in Parliament. Rajya Sabha was adjourned for the day amidst ruckus over the Adani row and links to billionaire George Soros. That and more when we return. The standoff between the government and opposition continues in Parliament. Rajya Sabha adjourned for the day amidst uproar over the alleged link between billionaire George Soros and Sonia Gandhi, as well as on the Adani issue. House Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar declined a notice filed by opposition MPs seeking a discussion on the Allahabad High Court judge's controversial remarks. Opposition MPs, including Priyanka Gandhi, continued their protests in Parliament, demanding a joint parliamentary probe into the Adani row. The Met Department has issued an orange alert for several districts of Tamil Nadu for the next 24 hours. Heavy downpour expected to lash the state. Reports have said that several schools in Chennai and other districts have been told to remain shut. NDRF teams have been directed to remain on standby and will be deployed accordingly. In international news, Syria's transitional prime minister has urged displaced Syrians to return home. The Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir has promised to ensure civil and religious rights of all groups. But the exodus of Syrians into neighbours like Lebanon continues. Israeli forces move deeper into Syria. The US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has headed to Jordan and Turkey to rally regional support for a Gaza ceasefire and a smooth transition in Syria. Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has become the first person in the world to surpass $400 billion in net worth. As per the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Musk's fortune stands at $447 billion, recording a surge of over $200 billion so far this year. Shares of Tesla hit a record high on Wednesday and have surged more than 70% this year. SpaceX has also seen its valuation rise to $350 billion following a secondary share sale. Time magazine is set to name Donald Trump as the Person of the Year. Just weeks after he won the US presidential election, he was named the Person of the Year in 2016 after his unexpected rise to presidency. Reports suggest Trump will ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange to celebrate the unveiling of the magazine cover. And you can watch that here on CNBC TV 18 as we bring you the action from the New York Stock Exchange. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with me.